The history of rock really began with the blues, a genre of music that was heavily ingrained in the black community during the early 1950s. The blues is a very groove-centered genre, putting a big emphasis on how the song makes you feel. The root of blues songs can be attributed to the pentatonic scale, which is also the root scale for rock music. During the 40s, blues groups like the Dominoes started to become more aggressive with distorted guitars, hard-driving drums, and walking bass lines that kept the groove of the song going. The first rock and roll band was Jackie Brenston and his Delta Cats, who released their first song Rocket 88 in 1951. This new style of music spread through Tennessee due to WLAC Radio, a new rock and roll station that grabbed the attention of white suburban teens who had never heard such music before. Rock grew throughout Eastern America, with artists like Buddy Holly and Jerry Lee Lewis paving the way for artists to come. It was around this time that in 1954, a new oh-so-sexy white man with a black man's voice came into the scene and changed everything. Elvis Presley was an instant hit, with his debut single, That's Alright, being broadcasted all over the state of Tennessee, with people asking radio stations to play it over and over again. 2 years later, in 1956, Elvis sang nationwide on CBS's stage show, and to no one's surprise, it was a massive hit. Rock and roll had now been heard all across America, and while the teens were loving it, the parents were not on board. White middle-class parents of the 50s were filled with hate when their teenagers would hang out with black teens and listen to music that was seen as too sexual. Because rock had been originated and spread by black people like Chuck Berry and Fats Domino, the genre was looked down upon by some. But even with the hate towards the music, some of these parents couldn't resist the band that is now considered by many to be the most important band of all time. The Beatles single-handedly changed the way music and pop culture was viewed. They inspired many genres to come, such as jangle, progressive rock, power pop, psychedelic rock, and even metal. They also popularized the making of full-length albums rather than singles. But most importantly, innovative and unique recording methods were becoming mainstream due to the Beatles and their willingness to experiment with new techniques in pursuit of a great song. They used multi-track recording machines, which allow you to record multiple sources of sound at the same time into separate tracks. Samples, which is the use of putting a portion of an existing song into a new recording, and artificial double tracking, which is an analog recording technique designed to enhance the sound of voices or instruments during the mixing process. Rock had become so abundant in the pop culture of the 60s that many new bands were becoming big. By the end of the 60s, we had rock and roll powerhouses like the Rolling Stones, the Beach Boys, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, Deep Purple, the Jimi Hendrix Experience, and The Who. All of these bands were integral to growing their genre and spreading it to new uncharted territory, like how Jimi Hendrix revolutionized the way guitar could be played and enjoyed. Songs like Voodoo Child and Purple Haze were unique and mesmerizing, showing the potential of how creative you can get with a guitar. While some bands were getting faster, Pink Floyd slowed things down with their progressive psychedelic space rock, seen in one of their most popular songs, Money. Counterculture and rebellion were on the rise in the 70s, as the Vietnam War divided the country. With this was the birth of punk rock, led by bands like the Velvet Underground, Ramones, The Clash, Dead Kennedys, Misfits, and the Sex Pistols. These bands were fast, loud, and often political, addressing issues like racial and economic injustice that were very apparent at the time. Screaming vocals and 2/4 time signatures were a staple of the genre, with songs like Blitzburg Pop. Punk also had its own unique fashion. Leather jackets, ripped skinny jeans, spiked bracelets, and ridiculous mohawks were all over the scene. While punk was on the rise, hard rock was also growing in popularity during the 70s. Black Sabbath led the genre with their album Paranoid, which included songs like Iron Man and War Pigs, which showed how heavy rock could get. The use of more aggressive distortion and power chords gave their song the classic hard rock sound. Power chords are a key element of all types of rock. It consists of a root, a fifth, and an octave, which all together sounds like. Add some distortion to it, and you can play hundreds of rock songs. During the 80s, many of the rock subgenres were being explored, but two stood out as the most popular. Glam rock and funk rock were getting big due to Motley Crue, Kiss, and early Guns N' Roses on the glam rock side, and Red Hot Chili Peppers, Primus, Mr. Bungle, and Infectious Grooves on the funk side. Glam rock is mainly characterized by the performers' exaggerated flamboyant looks. Kiss and Motley Crue both wore dark, somewhat revealing leather with spikes and big boots. Motley had over-the-top hair, and Kiss had their signature black and white face paint. The creative music videos, stage presence, and sex appeal, mostly from Motley, gave fans something new. Funk rock is a genre driven by funky, syncopated bass and bouncing drums with a powerful, steady downbeat. Many of these songs incorporate the style of slap bass to give it an extra layer of percussion and pizzazz. Slapping the bass is done by striking a low note with the bony part of your thumb and then popping a high note with your pointer or middle finger. This style can be heard throughout Stone Cold Bush by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. The 90s were the years of grunge. Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, and Nirvana were the four big groups. Grunge is a mixture between punk and hard rock, just without the speed of punk. Obviously, Kurt Cobain is the face of grunge, being that he was the frontman for Nirvana, which is now one of the most popular bands of all time. Nirvana brought grunge into the mainstream with their massively successful album Nevermind. Nevermind sold over 30 million copies worldwide and is the inspiration for many modern bands, as it is still well known to this day. Along with grunge, rap rock was also rising in popularity, with bands like Linkin Park, Limp Bizkit, Beastie Boys, and the highly political Rage Against the Machine leading it. These bands drew inspiration from old-school rappers like Run DMC and combined it with rockers like Led Zeppelin to create a genre that incorporated hard-driving instruments with rhythmic, fast-paced lyrics. With the end of the 90s comes the 21st century, and since this presentation has a time limit, I need to wrap this up. A 2000 started out very emo. We got My Chemical Romance, Fall Out Boy, and Panic at the Disco. Emo is sad rock for middle schoolers. It's not a phase, Mom. I'm gonna be running Yuri's future husband. 2002 had the Arctic Monkeys. Look, it's the song. Cage the Elephant formed in 2006 and blew up from their song Ain't No Rest for the Wicked. 2010 started with an absolute banger, with One Direction forming. Harry Styles, You Can Join Our Marriage. The same year Pumped Up Kicks was released and gained popularity due to its catchy chorus and memorable melody. Throughout the remaining years, there are just popular one-hit wonders here and there, which is pretty much how it goes nowadays. Last but most certainly least, a god-awful, embarrassing dumpster fire of an album is released in 2021 by 21 Pilots titled Scaled and Icy. To this date, it is by far the worst album by the band, and should be left to burn in hell for eternity next to all the other awful albums throughout the history of rock.